I welcome you all to the free training series of ManageEngine Applications Manager. So this is today's topic, uncovering performance problems with full stack monitoring. Let's discuss on the agenda. So our agenda is split into 4 parts. So the first part will be saying on how to identify problematic elements in your application code. Here we'll be seeing more on how to find the stack trace of the application, how to identify slow method calls, the DB calls, HTTPS calls, etc. Second topic will be seeing more on the cross application tracing, which is also called as distributed application tracing. So here we'll be seeing how the connection is made. So if an application is placed on one IP, it's connected to a different IP. And if that is connected to a database, how the complete mapping is done. That will be seeing in the second topic. Third topic will be on the code level visibility and the thread profiling of how the current methods are used in a thread, etc. Last topic will be seeing about the service map. So this service map would be very useful for the developers. So here they will be able to know where exactly the problem prevails, if it's in the application end or if the database end, how many failed requests are happening. All these can be seen in the service map. So now quickly let's get inside the topic. So before getting inside, let's see why application performance monitoring. Let's consider an example here. So many users are accessing a website. So you have built an application, and that application, many users are accessing that application. So when they are accessing this application, they start facing slowness. Like for example, when they're clicking on to any link, it's getting more time to open, or it's getting more time to get buffered, or even when the page is getting open, it's taking a lot of time to load the content. So because of all of these problems, users will get frustrated. Normally, users like us will get frustrated when the page is loading really slow. So we start having a very bad impression on the website. So we start giving negative reviews on the website. So when there is more negative reviews, so these days we rely on the reviews before we do anything, whether we order a restaurant or anything, we rely on the reviews. So when there is a negative reviews, obviously there will be a loss of customers. So when the customers tends to decrease, developer is unsure about what exactly the issue is, why there are loss of customers. And because of this, we have introduced the APM Insight in Applications Manager, which will help in monitoring depth of the issue. So here we will be able to know exactly where the problem prevails before it affects the end users. So this is the main reason of application performance monitoring. We all know performance is the heart rate of any application success. Your website is fast, everything is working fine, yes, your business succeeds. So that's how it is. So these days, we user rely on the web application to fulfill everyday needs. We can also term a business success is directly proportional to the application performance. So these are some of the supported technologies that we have right now in APM Insight and Applications Manager. That is Java, .NET, Node.js, PHP, .NET Core, and Ruby on Rails. So first, let's see how the configuration is done. How do we install an agent? Where do we install? Or how the agent is sending the data? Let's see on that, and then let's get into the topic more in depth. So first, you will be asked to install your product in the server. So once Applications Manager product is installed in the server, you will be asked to install an agent in your application server. So on which server your application is running. For example, like Java, PHP, Node.js, whatever application is running, in that server, you will be asked to install an agent. Once an agent is installed, you will be asked to give all the configuration details, like your app manager, host, port, the license key. And you will also be asked to give an argument in the startup file of your application. So once an argument is given in the startup file of your application, or restart of your application will be mandatory. Once restart is done, the data will get, the agent will get hooked up with the application, and the data will be sent to your Applications Manager server. So this is how the configuration is done. It is a very simple configuration. Let me quickly show you a sample on how the configuration is done. So when I say an agent is nothing but it is just a zip file. So I have just installed an APM Insight Java agent. It's a zip file. So once you install the zip file, you will be asked to unzip it. So once you unzip it, you will be having a file called apminsight.conf. In this apminsight.conf file, you will be asked to give the license key. This license key, applications manager, host, and the port detail and the name of your application. So you install the zip file, unzip it, you get a file called apminsight.conf. Once you unzip it, give the license key, the application name, and the host and port details. So once this first step is done, the second step is to add an argument in the startup file of your application. So you will be knowing, so which is the startup file of your application, which invokes the startup process of your application. In that file, you will be asked to give an argument like this. So I have already opened a file. So this will be the argument. I'm just taking an example for the Java application. Let's comment it. So yeah, so I've uncommented it. So you have to give an argument like this. So once this argument is given, restart of your application server is mandatory. Let it be. If it's a Java, let's take if it's a Tomcat or JBoss, WebLogic, whatever type of server, restart of your application is mandatory. Once a restart is done, automatically the agent hooks up with the application. And once you start performing the transactions, everything will get recorded in App Manager UI. So each and every click you perform in your application, when you perform the click, what are the traces, what are the DP calls that has been made, everything would get recorded and shown in App Manager UI. So let me show all that from the next topic. So this is how the configuration is done. Identifying problematic elements in your application code. So these are some of the factors that's affecting the application performance. Not only these, we also have other factors like web server, the app code, there are many factors that's affecting the application performance. So when I say web server, so normally we know web server will get overloaded because user count. And when there's a huge number of user count, obviously it will result in website failure. And also because of the load balancer, we can say. Memory usage. So when there is a high load transaction taking place, we know out of memory exceptions will take place. Also, when this out of memory exception will take place, when users are accessing many web pages per second or due to high thread usage, because of all of these, memory leak might happen. App code, we know buggy code will cause application performance issues. Web service calls, slow DB calls, method calls, all these will result in app code issues. So these are some of the factors. Let's quickly go to the UI of App Manager and see how it looks like. So I'm just going to the UI. So we have a separate tab called APM Insight tab where you can see. So I'm just showing a demo from our demo site, demo.appmanager.com. It's a public URL. Once I complete this demo, also you can go to the demo site, click on to APM tab where you can see all the details where we have already installed and configured in our demo setup. So I'm just going to one of the Java application. So once all the configuration is done, you can see the details like this. So you can see the availability of your application, the health, overview tab, you can see the AppDex score. AppDex score is nothing but percentage of satisfied, frustrated, and tolerating users while they're accessing your application. It's completely based upon the response time of your application. You can also see the request throughput, the request count, the error percentage, data throughput, and the exceptions happening. Scrolling down, you can also see the response time broken by components. If you just hover your mouse, you can see at this particular time what is the response time and what is the component used. You can also see the request throughput graph. You can also click here to drill down more in detail. You can see the data throughput, the error count, exception count, the exception split up, HTTP error rate. Overview tab, you can just see the top transaction by response time, top slow traces, the error transaction, and all of that. If you want to know more information about each and every transaction that the user is performing on your application, Just click on to the transaction tab, where you can see each and every transaction that the user is performing in your application along with the AppDex score. For this particular transaction, what is the score? If the user is satisfied, frustrated, or if they are in the tolerating level. That can be seen for each and every transaction. The count, how many times this particular transaction is taking place by the users. That can be seen, the error percentage, the response time, maximum response time, and all of that. In case you, being a developer, wants to know more information about one specific transaction, for this particular transaction, why did the AppDex score go very less? If you want to know that information, just click on to that particular transaction, where you can see what are the traces for that particular transaction, the response time, CPU time, how many external calls, the SQL time, and all of that. And for this particular transaction, what is the response time broken by components, the app code, the DB call, the overall response time, also the request throughput, the data throughput, and the split up. So right now there is no exception for this particular transaction, so there is no data over there, and also the exception count and the error count. So these are the information that you can see for each and every transaction. Also, important thing, you can also see all the transaction, all these you can fetch it in CSV, Excel, or a PDF format. You can get a report of it. Background tab, you can see if there are any API calls or if there are any background transaction that's taking place, you can see from the background tab. Error tab, where you can see about the error transactions. You can also see in a graph view or a table view like this. So database tab, you can see all the queries that is getting executed in the background of your application. So each and every transaction you perform, what are the queries that is getting executed in the background of your application? All those queries will get listed here along with the count, how much time this particular query has taken place, the error percentage, and the response time. In case if you want to know more information about one specific query, you can just click on to it, where you can see during this particular query, what are the traces, the database operation called by the caller, the response time, the database operation throughput, all of these can be seen from here. So now let's quickly get into the next topic. Leverage distributed tracing to monitor cross applications. So this is a very interesting topic, we can say. So now let's take an example. What is a distributed tracing? We know when application, let's take an example here first. So let's take an application is hosted on one IP, it is connected to a different application in a different IP, and that's connected to a database. So you aren't exactly sure. You don't need to go to each and every server to check what is wrong with this application, what is wrong with this database. That will be eliminated because of this distributed tracing monitoring in Applications Manager. We can also say it is also called as cross application tracing. And this will be very useful when application is built on microservice architecture. So I have read in a recent global survey that most of the companies, like about 86% of the companies, have moved to distributed architecture for their application these days. So that was the main reason we brought this distributed tracing in Applications Manager. So the main advantage of distributed tracing is that we can get bottom of the application performance issues faster, even before the end user is noticing something is going wrong. It provides early signs when microservice is in poor health, and we'll also be able to spot bottlenecks anywhere. Distributed tracing also pinpoints the exact areas of the issues, which improves the growth of the business. Now let's take an example of this diagram. So from this diagram, we can see that there is the Kubernetes cluster, and this cluster has different parts. Each part consists of multiple components like PHP, Java, .NET, which is connected to a SQL database. Now this agent will be deployed in an application, and we will be seeing a distributed architecture in the service map. So once this is done, what our app manager does, we will be collecting data, discovering, identifying the root cause of the issue, and thus seeing the root cause of the issue, you will be able to fix the issue much faster. So this is one of the screenshot which I have taken once I configured a distributed tracing sample in my local build. So this is how it looks. You can see the distributed tracing, what's the start time, the transaction, from where to where the transaction is taking place, the response time, the application. You can also see it in a tree view. You can also see how many external calls are made, the response time, DB queries, what's the memory used, all of these can be seen. Quickly, let me show from our demo site. So here in the traces tab, you can see all the traces happening in the application. So you will also have an option when you wanted the trace to be captured. So for example, if my transactions goes more than 1 second, I wanted it to be captured as a trace. Accordingly, you can define it in the settings icon, which I'll be showing by the end of the presentation. So you can define however you wanted the trace to be captured. Accordingly, you can define and you will start getting the trace details like this. When you just click on to the distributed, you can start seeing the distributed trace. Right now, we do not have anything configured, but yes, you can see it from the distributed trace. So you can see all the transactions along with the response time, CPU time, all of that. Clicking on to one particular transaction, from this summary tab, you can see slowest method calls. So during that particular trace, what are the slowest method calls along with the count, how much duration it has happened for that particular call and their percentage. You can also see the external calls. External calls are nothing but combination of your HTTP and the database call. That details can be viewed here. Trace details, where you can see the complete trace details. So you can see some class file has been invoked, some DB calls has been made. So the complete trace details will be captured along with the delay, exclusive, and the total time. SQL statements. During that particular trace, what are the queries that has got executed in the background of your application? That will be captured along with the query start time and the execution time. These are some of the details that we show from the trace tab. Let's get into the next topic, gaining code level visibility with thread profiling. So here we capture the stack trace of the application. So in APM Insight, we can see exactly which stack trace is causing the application slowness. And by capturing this stack trace, automatically developers can go and rectify the problem. As we all know, what is a stack trace? A stack trace occurs when Java application throws an exception during the execution of program. Very useful for the developers to figure out where exactly the problem lies. So this is about the stack trace and about the thread profiling. Thread profiling, we will be able to analyze code level performance at deep level. We will be able to identify, isolate bottlenecks in code stack. And each thread profile consists of a list of threads that were running when application is being profiled. So we have two types of thread profiling. That's a schedule profiling and on-demand profiling. So in schedule profiling, APM Insight schedules a thread profile twice a day for a period of 5 minutes. And on-demand profiling, one can initiate thread profiling at a current time for a duration ranging from 5 to 30 minutes. So you can use any of the profiling. You can either go for the scheduled or the on-demand profiling. Let me quickly show from the UI of App Manager. So here, first, let me show about the stack trace. So you have an exception tab where you can just click onto it, click on to view stack trace, where you can see the complete trace that's causing the slowness of your application along with the exception class. What is the message, the severity, and which exact time this slowness has happened. That can be seen from this exception tab. Also, you can see the other traces of the transaction. So while seeing this, you can also see about the thread name, what is the response time, collection time, which exact time and the date, the thread ID. So all these information can be seen from the traces tab. JVM tab, where you can see about the memory usage, like what is the CPU usage, how much memory is consumed by the application on the server. So you can see the CPU usage, heap memory, non-heap memory, runtime, JIT memory, all of these will get captured along with the garbage collector. So you can see the complete total connections, how much collections are made, what is the collection count, what is the time spent. All these can be seen from this garbage collector tab. Threads tab, where you can see about the thread details, the thread data, what are the live, daemon, peak thread, CPU time, all of that will be captured here. Also the configuration tab. Exception tab, where you can see about the exceptions. What are the top exceptions happening in your application? What are the top error codes? How many times this particular error code is happening? The recent 5 transactions, the exception traces, split up by exception count. What are the warning, the fatal? It is clearly depicted in different colors in the graph. Also about the error count. All of these can be seen in this exception tab. Thread profile tab, where you can see about the collection time, the thread count, what is the CPU time, the memory, all that can be seen. And if you wanted to know about the current methods used in a thread, you can just click onto it, where you can see the current methods used in a thread along with the thread ID, the CPU, and the memory allocated. So these are some of the information that we show for the stack trace, the JVM, and the thread profile. Now let's quickly get into the next topic. Visualize dependency in your application architecture with automated service map. So what is a service map? So we can view the entire application infrastructure along with its connection to the dependent resources. As I've already informed, you can see this application is connected to a different application, and that's connected to a different database. So for a distributed architecture, this service map will be very useful for the users. So here we can exactly know the application connections, the dependency, including applications, database, host, servers, etc. So the main purpose of service map is that we can quickly see the current health and operational state of the entire environment. We can collaborate, drive, shared understanding of an architecture. We can also understand how application and services in your architecture connect and communicate. So we have 3 different types of service map, that is the map view, table view, and the graph view. So this is an example of a map view. So here clearly we can see there is an application which is installed in one server. It is making different HTTP call, and there are 3 database which is connected to this particular application. So just by seeing the service map itself, where you can know where exactly the problem is. So whichever is depicted in red, which means it is unavailable or it has any failed request. So all those goes in red. Whichever is working fine, no failed request, all those shows in green. And if they are in scheduled maintenance, again it's pink. And if there is no data coming from that, it will be shown colorless. So this is a map view example which I have for a service map. So this is how the service map looks like. So we being a developer, we can know exactly where the problem is. We don't need to go to different servers to check for the issues. Instead, we can just install an app manager, just sit in one place and see where exactly the problem is. Problem is in the database end, or the problem is in the application end. All these can be seen from this service map. Let me quickly show from the UI of App Manager. So this is a service map. So this is a map view. So here you can clearly see if there's an application which is connected to a database, which is in the same IP. So it is shown in red, which means there are some failed requests happening in this particular database. So if I just hover my mouse here, I can see what is the response time. What is the response time? Out of these many total requests, 7 failed requests, and this is the throughput. So when I just click onto it to get more information, it takes me to the graph view, where I can see the response time in graph along with the minimum, max, average value, the throughput, and all of that. Table view, where I can see the components in a table view form, which will again take me to a graph view. So this is how it looks like. So this is about the service map in Applications Manager. Here in table view, we will be able to components along the respective host. So when we click on to individual components, as I've already done from the graph view, when I just click on to it, it will take me to the different view. So this is about the graph view and the table view. So let me quickly see how we configure alarms in APM Insight. So if anything goes wrong in your application, you definitely need an alarm, and that alarm must be notified to you, right? So for that, to configure alarms, you just go to the configure alarms tab. select monitor type. So you have template. So if you wanted to configure individually, you just go with the monitor, select what's the monitor type and the name of the monitor that you give. So when I select monitor type, it will get applied for all your APM monitors. So I will just select it as APM Insight. So these are the attributes that right now we support for configuring alarms in APM Insight. So whatever type of alarms you wanted, you can just select it from here, click on to associate, create a threshold profile. You can either create a manual threshold profile, or we also have a machine learning based threshold profile. You can use any of these threshold profile, select the threshold which you have created, and create an email or an SMS action, because when you get an alarm, you want it to be notified. So you can select any type of action, and there are some customers who needs an alarm only when there is a critical severity, and there are some customers who needs an alert when all the severity it touches, whether it's critical, warning, or clear. So accordingly, based upon your preference, you can just select it and move it here. So if you want only for critical, move it only for critical. If you want it for warning, clear, everything, then just move it for warning, clear, everything like this, and click on to the save button. So this is how you configure alarms in APM Insight. Coming to the reports part. So reports, let it be any type of reports. You can fetch up to 1 year in Applications Manager. We have different types of report. You can also get a attribute wise report. You have a trend analysis report. You have forecast report, capacity planning report. You can just select any type of report. So I'm just going to application server, going to any one of the report for application server. So this is how the report looks like. So you can just filter however you want it. You also have an option where you can fetch a report up to 1 year. You also have custom time period option. For example, you want a report from yesterday this time to today this time. Accordingly, you can go for the custom time period option, give the from and the to time, and get a complete report. So this is one of the options that we have in App Manager. It's not only about fetching the reports manually. We can also schedule reports in Applications Manager. So to schedule the reports, you just have to go to the Settings tab, click on to Schedule Reports, click on to New Schedule, and give a schedule name, what report type you wanted, what type of report you wanted, for which application servers you wanted the report for. You can give all of these. You can also give your email address. So I'm just selecting what type of application servers I wanted the report for. You can also see at which time you wanted the report to be sent to your email, whether you want a hourly, daily, weekly, or a monthly report, whether you want it in a PDF or CSV format, and give the email address. So by doing this, automatically the report will keep sending to your email. You don't need to manually go and check for the report each and every time. Instead, you can go for the schedule option. Also, one important thing I just forgot to mention about the settings icon in APM Insight. So we have various type of settings. For example, I don't want these transactions to be captured, or I wanted these are my important transaction that I wanted to monitor. If you have something like that, we have a settings icon. Let me just show you that. Just going to APM Insight, going again to a Java application, transactions. So if I wanted to configure key transactions, so these are my important transaction that has to be captured. So I just click on to configure key transaction, select the important transaction that I wanted to monitor, click on to save transaction. So this is one of the options that we have. And if you wanted to show or hide metrics, we have a button here. Accordingly, you can go and do it. Also, we have some customizable options. Let me just show you that. So these are some of the customizable options. We have an option where you can set up the transaction time, all of that. So these are the options. So you can also custom instrument your methods or classes. So by default, all the methods and classes will be instrumented. So you can custom instrument methods or frameworks of specific features or modules in your application. So this is one of the options. You have where you can capture SQL database queries. So if you wanted all the queries that has to be captured when a transaction is taking place, you can enable this box. Also, as I've already informed, so when you wanted a trace to be captured, so if I define it as 3 seconds, so if any transaction goes more than 3 seconds, then a trace will be captured. You can also select the agent auto upgrade. By default, normally our team releases a new agent once in 3 months. So enabling this agent auto upgrade option, we will be automatically upgraded to the latest version. You also have logging level in the list of URL extension that to be skipped from tracking. So if you do not want some URLs that you wanted to track, you can just give it in this field. You also have HTTP parameters to ignore, and you also have HTTP error codes that you wanted to ignore. And if you wanted to track your background transaction, yes, you can go ahead and enable it. Traces for the background transaction. Similarly, for the background transaction, if your transaction goes more than this seconds, I wanted it to be captured as a trace. You can just go and define the seconds over here and give the sampling factor. Sampling factor is nothing but, let's say you have 5 requests of the same kind, 5 transaction is happening of the same kind. If I define my sampling factor as 1, so 1 and 5 requests will get captured in App Manager UI. If you do not want all the transaction to be captured, and if you just wanted one of the similar transaction to be captured, you can define your sampling factor accordingly. And yeah, you have all of these. You can set up an abdex threshold on the web transaction configuration. You can also give a sampling factor there, create a transaction trace threshold. If you wanted some exceptions to be ignored, you can just list out the exception, because you know it's a frequent exception, you know it. You can just list down over that. You can also skip some of the transaction that you do not want to show. So these are some of the options that we have in App Manager. So now let's quickly get into the presentation. We have almost come to the end of the presentation. And before going to the end, let me just discuss on some of the admin activities on how the dashboards are customizable, and some of the admin activities like the downtime scheduler, alarm escalation, etc. So for that, I'm just going to again the UI, the demo site of our App Manager. So here we have a different settings option. So in the settings tab, we have something called as downtime scheduler. Downtime scheduler is something like, let's take an example. Your application is going for a maintenance state. Obviously, you know, during this particular time, my application is going for a maintenance state, and you do not want unwanted alerts during that particular time. Accordingly, you can go ahead and configure your downtime. From which time to which time it's going for a maintenance state, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, which applications are going for a maintenance state, you can just move it like this and click on to save, so that during this particular time, monitoring will not happen. Once the time completes, automatically the monitoring will resume. So this is one of the option of the downtime scheduler. We also have something called as alarm escalation. Let's take an example. There is a critical alarm for a long period of time. I'm defining it as 2 hours, and nobody acknowledges that alarm. So you can escalate this alarm to level 1, level 2. However you wanted, you can define your rule and escalate the alarm. So this is one of the option that we have. We also have something called as business hour in Applications Manager. Business hour is something like, there are some customers, they say threshold profile must be applied only from Monday to Saturday from this time to this time. Accordingly, they just wanted monitoring to happen from this time to this time, Monday to Friday. Accordingly, you can go ahead, create a business hour and associate this business hour to the threshold profiles. So this is one of the options that we have. And coming to the dashboard part, dashboards are extremely customizable in App Manager UI. So you can define your dashboard however you want it. You can select your own widgets, whatever widget you wanted to show in the dashboard, those can be selected by yourself. So this is one of the dashboard that we have created in our demo site. You can also select a pie chart or a bar graph, or you can also define it in a map view, a business view, however you wanted, you can define your own dashboard. So this is one of the dashboard that we have created in our demo site. Just a sample dashboard. So you can just go through this. Once I complete the webinar, you can just go to demo.appmanager.com and check for the dashboard. Let's do a quick recap of whatever we have completed till now in our webinar. So the first topic we have seen on configuration of agent-based monitoring and application manager, how the configuration is done, what is the technology that we use, how the data is sent. We have explained it more in detail about it. We have also seen on how to find problems in application code, like viewing the stack trace, which exact trace is causing the slowness of your application, where exactly the problem provides. That we have seen in the second topic. Third topic we have seen on how to track the transaction from one application to another and how to debug the issue more in detail. We have also seen about the code stack thread profiling and about the service map. Finally, we have seen about some of the admin activities, the alarm reports in APM Insight, and the downtime scheduler, the dashboard part. All of these has been seen in this topic. So thank you so much, each one of you, for being during this course of webinar.